Welcome to PlanStronger TV. I'm your host, David Holland. Are you making mistakes educating your kids or grandkids about money? I've been a financial planner for over 20 years, and there are things I know I could still do a better job of when it comes to money and my own kids. On today's program, I'm joined by certified financial planner Laura Scharr-Bykowsky for her expert opinion on the subject. Maybe she can straighten me out. Let's roll. And welcome back. Why do we make mistakes with our money, with our kids? Parents, grandparents, why do we make mistakes in how we teach kids about money? Why do we do that? Well, we're going to dig deeply into this subject. I'm very excited to bring back to the program Laura Scharr-Bykowsky, a certified financial planner from Columbia, South Carolina. Welcome, Laura.
Yes, thank you, David. Thanks for having me.
Good to have you with us. So, the big question that I want to ask you, we all know that we're human. We make mistakes when it comes to our own finances. Being financial planners,
right.
We, of course, are most critical of ourselves, right?
We're not perfect.
We're not perfect, and we know better, right?
Correct.
So everybody makes mistakes with their money. We, of course, want to learn from that and do better going forward. But when it comes to kids, you know, we're dealing with a child that we are trying to mold to become an independent adult. So the first question I want to dig into a little bit with you is, not that we're going to make mistakes, we can get into that, but why do we make mistakes?
Because we love our babies, you know, we want them to have maybe what we didn't. We think that in a way we use money as a way to love our kids. And we're very emotional when it comes to our kids. And I see this a lot, particularly with baby boomers. I mean, they really just want to give their kids everything. But if we really love our kids, we really need to teach them to fish instead of handing them the fish always. So I think, you know, the best thing that we can do with our kids is show them where the boundaries are, what the rules are. They're really looking for us to teach them that. And they're looking for us to be good role models. So yes, we are emotional with our kids. And I tend to see this especially with divorced couples. They tend to really, well, my mom gave me this. Well, dad's got to give more. It's this vying for love, I'm the better parent thing. So we all do it, but hopefully we can try to learn from today's tips and be better parents.
Yeah, not just for parents, but for divorced parents and for grandparents.
Absolutely,
and
grandparents.
Stepmoms, stepdads, you know, a lot of blended families.
Absolutely.
That there's a child that we are trying to build and mold and grow that takes that responsibility, takes precedence over everything else in terms of, you know, who do they love the most? Who do they thank the most? Who do they appreciate the most? All of that.
And by the way, I've actually seen situations where the grandparents have really made it tough for not only their kids, but their grandkids, because they paid for example, 100% of the college, 100% of the private school. Therefore, the parents didn't feel a need to even save, so they just didn't save. And the grandkids just seem to think, wow, we got it good, and we don't ever have to worry about money because there's money coming from this unending supply here. So you have to be careful, make sure you don't, I think all kids should have skin in the game.
I think that's important, and I think one of the big things that I know you've spoken about, Laura, is the importance of setting a good role model and, you know, not giving in to whims and being careful. And I've had my kids, you'll like this, I've had my kids point out when what I'm saying to them is different than what they've seen me do.
And I would expect, I would hope that our kids would make us, you know, hold us accountable.
So they're helping me.
Yeah, I mean, and we're, like I said, we're not perfect. It's a trial and error thing, and parenting's tough, but you know, we definitely need to try our best if we can. But certainly it starts off, one of the biggest things that I see being a problem is impulse buying, because you start seeing that at a very young age. So that's when that 3 or 4-year-old goes into the grocery market and they see, you're at the aisle, you're ready to check out, and they see that candy bar and they've got to have that candy bar. Now, sometimes they go a little crazy and they might cry, they might tantrum, whatever. And it's so easy for us as parents to say, oh, just throw the candy bar in, it's not that big a deal, I'll buy it. No, we need to start teaching them at that age, okay, I see that you want that, but for example, this is how I might handle that. I've already spent my budget for groceries today.
Right.
And I think if you really want that, why don't you pay that from your allowance? Because I think a kid at that age should start getting an allowance. Or let's put something back in the basket that you wanted, like your favorite cereal, and then you can get the candy bar. What does that teach them? It teaches them that money is limited. It gets them involved in the financial decision-making process. And I just think that's a good thing for kids to start learning. And trade-offs, that's right. Very much, that they have to trade off.
Well, there's a trend that we see now within retail shops and such, where we're seeing a trend of charitable involvement, where they are collecting money for a particular charity, either at the register or outside the store, and that's another teachable moment. Absolutely,
it's a great way to once again teach by being a role model. Take some of your money and save it, take some of it and spend it, but take some of it and gift it.
Right.
And you can also start a discussion, like you can put money and have the kid put the money in the box or the extra dollar that goes to the local kids hospital, but then also describe your charitable gifting plan for the year. Say, we're doing this now, but let me tell you what else we're doing. I think it's so important for us to share with our kids our philosophy with respect to charity and spending and saving.
I really like it because it's an opportunity to talk about their ability to make decisions about who and when and how much they're going to give.
Right.
So these are all opportunities, and that really ties into another important subject I wanted to ask you about is how the kids perceive what is happening with them and their finances or the family's finances and other people, their friends, the peer pressure.
Right.
So how they perceive what they experience, and they know whether one of their friends is able to get candy in the checkout aisle or not on a whim. So all that kind of circulates. How much of that should we take into consideration as we are teaching our kids?
It's huge. So this is the situation where the kid goes into school and everyone's, when my son was growing up, it was the Pokemon cards, and then it was the magic beans, and there's normally it starts with a fad, and it could be like a pocketbook for a girl, I don't know, but it starts with this fad, and the kids get really sucked into it, and they feel like they've got to have what everybody else has. Why? They're not even quite sure, but they're like, everybody else has it, and it's, once again, that's the next teachable moment where we say, okay, you really want this Pokemon card, and then you start, what is it about the Pokemon cards that you like? Do you think you'll be liking these Pokemon cards a year from now? Do you want to spend this now? Do you think 5 years from now you'll still have these Pokemon cards? Yeah, I probably won't. Well, and so you gauge that conversation, and what you also say is, well, I realize if they still really want it, let's wait a couple weeks or a month.
Right.
And what you're doing is you're teaching them really good shopping habits, because once again, we can't always get what we want when we want it. Let's wait. Then a month later, do you still want those Pokemon cards? The kids haven't really been talking about it much at school. Okay, isn't it a good thing that we waited?
Hey, maybe even some of the other kids will want to sell theirs at a discount.
At a discount, right. And then if they still want it, you can say, okay, you really want it. Now let's talk about good shopping habits.
Right.
Let's do some comparison shopping. Let's look for coupons. Let's find the kid that's sick of it already. We can buy it at a discount. So you're just teaching them the thought process that goes with the purchasing decision.
That makes sense.
So it's a teachable moment again, but those are kind of the first things you see, the impulse buying at a very young age, and then the peer pressure, and now how not to get sucked into it.
Well, there's a whole other side of the peer pressure, and it's keeping up with the Joneses. Now for the parents who, not only for the kids and making sure the kids have what other kids of other parents that they know have, but also that the parents and the things that they buy and the way their house looks, and there's a lot, and in those moments, there's a lot of role modeling there.
Exactly. So the keeping up with the Joneses is the peer pressure of the adult type. So that's where the parent, and I've had clients, and I'm sure you have clients as well, that come in and say, but I have to pay for spring break for little Janie. All of her friends are going, and all the other parents are doing this, and I've got to get them a car, and he can't just borrow his brother's car. They can't share it. They have to have their own car. I'm like, well, what Bible out there does
Says
it say? I've never heard of this specific
Right.
Bible of the kids that says each one gets their own car. So there's kind of this new sense of entitlement with respect to the kids, but then it gets into the parents' brain, and they've got to pay for the special wedding and the spring break and the traveling sports team. And what happens is it literally vaporizes the parents' finances.
Well, that brings me to the next question I was going to have. How I know that you have done financial planning for a very long time. How often have you seen parents or even grandparents, you know, accessing some of their own retirement funds and maybe in a way that they shouldn't?
I have a great story for you. So I had a client who had lost his job, just found out that he lost his job. So he came in, he scheduled a meeting. He had maybe 2 months worth of living expenses in cash and didn't really, you know, have any prospects at that time. But his daughter had gotten engaged and he had to pay for that wedding. And so, you know, you have a conversation, you say, well, listen, I'm really concerned that you can barely take care of your
Right.
own, how are you going to eat and keep your mortgage going? But I have to pay for that wedding. And it was just this moment of, okay, let's step back here. My parents didn't have a lot of money. They couldn't afford a whole wedding, but here's how you handle it. You tell your child what you can pay for and how you will support it. And you know what? Your kid respects you for your kid. No kid wants to see their parent go bankrupt and have their retirement suffer for them to have a lavish wedding for one day. They just don't. And parents think that they can't have these frank discussions. We need to be frank with our children and our parents. We need to let those discussions happen. There's nothing wrong with saying, honey, I just lost my job, but I will pay for your dress and I'll pay for the flowers.
Well, you know, it reminds me of, before attempting to help others, please put the mask on yourself first.
Exactly. And that gets into the whole, you don't want to, here's the problem. This is the story. People get out of college and they say, well, I don't want to save for retirement because I've got to reduce my school debt, or I've got to, you know, I'm going to get married. I want to save up for that. And then they get married and they say, well, I really have to start saving for a down payment on the house. And then, well, now we had a kid. There's always a reason to delay, and it tends to be our kids, because we we love our kids. We want the best for them, but we don't want to be in a situation where we're 50 years old and we have not saved substantially for retirement. Because you and I both know you're in deep trouble if you're at that point and you don't have a lot.
Time's running out.
You have maybe 15, 20 years to still save. And they're just starting. They have their whole lifetime.
That's right.
So really, and I always tell my clients, you need to prioritize your retirement. Like you say, put your mask on before you start thinking about the kids, particularly if it's a discretionary thing like a wedding or sports or spring break.
Well, you're always going to be in the middle. You have your own parents and you have the kids. I mean, every generation has that sandwich that they are part of. It'll be for your kids next. So so that really brings to the point of achieving a balance.
And also we're getting, like you're saying, the sandwich generation where you are maybe having to take off work to take care of elderly parents. At the same time, you have kids that are maybe needing some help. And I have some clients that want to provide not only a full college education, but want to do a down payment for a home. And it just gets kind of crazy, and pay for grad school. And once again, it goes about prioritizing and balancing. It's the balance between, are you really helping yourself in doing that? And by the way, even if you have enough money, even if you're wealthy, is it really a good thing to be spoon feeding all of these things to your kids? Because then they have no incentive to save. Where's the incentive? You want your kids to feel a little of that urgency and that hunger. Yeah,
that was going to be the follow-up question is, it's okay, isn't it okay to let them struggle a little bit? I mean, isn't that worth it in the long run, that maybe they have a little bit of times and short-term experiences where they find themselves in a difficult spot and they have to work through it?
Absolutely. I think in some ways, when you hear a lot of very famous people who are very wealthy, part of the reason that they reached that pinnacle of success was because they fell on hard times and they really had to struggle. and their ingenuity made them who they were. And so I think that if we make it too easy and too comfortable for our kids, that they have no incentive, and it's kind of the trust fund baby syndrome.
Yeah.
There's just no incentive for you to work if you know that there's this chunk of change that's constantly being thrown your way. And that's why I say, even if you're a wealthy household or you're a wealthy grandparent, and you can afford to fully fund, I still think it's important to not do that, because I think that if you do that, then your kids and your grandkids are going to lack financial discipline and that hunger that they need to really move and grow and shape and be the person that they're meant to be.
That's very good. Well, that kind of brings me to one of my final questions I had for you, Laura, is that the grandparents' role, especially when there are resources and there are assets and a desire to, you know, to fulfill a legacy, that this is my offspring, these are my lineal descendants, I want for them to have, I want to make their life easier, or it may even be that the grandparents have had a tough road themselves, and it's not necessarily that they want them to be spoiled, but simply that they are the target of all of the hard work, and that's a way for the grandparent to feel like they've accomplished.
To pay it forward. And also, the issue there is that there are some situations where grandparents have the wealth, and for, you know, a certain reason, it could be health, it could be situations for their grandkids, they're on tough times, and it warrants them helping out. So that's not to say that they shouldn't if it's needed. The key thing there is setting a limit, a limited amount of time or a limited amount of money. So you could say, okay, I'm going to provide $10,000 to each grandkid for a deposit on their home, but that's it. Or I'm going to help out Johnny because he had a medical bill, and I'm going to pay it directly to the medical facility because that doesn't even count, as you know, to gifting. And so they need it, and that's warranted, but that's not to mean that I'm going to be giving this gift every year ad infinitum.
Right.
I think when the gifts become expected is where you run into problems.
Well, you're financing their lifestyle.
Exactly. They begin to say, wow, I am always going to get that money, and therefore I don't need to save. And I've seen the situation where they say, I don't need to work as hard.
Wow. And
so they just stop working because they feel like they can live off of that.
Well, that brings me to a follow-up on the trust. You mentioned trust fund babies earlier, and I think that if a grandparent or parent wants to do some really smart planning, that a trust can be an integral part of that, and I think it's important for families to have conversations about their finances and transferring wealth to the next generation, but don't have to tell the grandson or granddaughter what they're going to get at some point. It can be held in trust, and they can get it down the road, and it can be done in a very controlled, measured, and supportive way, not a disruptive way.
Absolutely, and the trust can be, you know, worded such that it, you know, there's certainly some rules and regulations about how that money is distributed and such. But I think the key thing there is just, you don't want to be in a situation where you're telling the kids or grandkids, oh, don't worry, we're wealthy, you don't ever have to work. That's kind of like, no. That's the worst thing you can be telling a kid. I'm not sure if there's
something worse you can say than that.
Truly, but I've heard clients saying that, and I've seen the repercussions. And so, you know, at some point your kids are going to be on to the fact that you do have a lot of wealth. And so, once again, it's about being a good role model. So it's how you live your lifestyle and how you give, how you live, how you give, how you spend. So being a good role model, being a good steward of your funds, and passing on that to your sons or daughters or grandkids, that's the key thing. Excellent lessons to take to heart for our guests and our viewers watching, that they can take these things and apply them. Very good. Laura, you make an excellent guest. Thank you so much. Thank you. Laura Scharr-Bykowsky, certified financial planner, joining us from South Carolina. Thank you, Laura. Thank you. Okay, it's time for the scoop. This is the part of the program where I give you the inside scoop on the world of finance. So these are the questions that probably many of you have that you'd like to ask, but haven't had the right opportunity. So here you go. First on my list, what does it take to be a financial planner? Nothing. What? Anybody can say they're a financial planner, but to have the licenses and the credentials, that's a whole other story.
If somebody wants to be a certified financial planner, for example, there are tests to take, there's studying to do, and there's a big, fat final exam that I still remember that takes a couple days to get right, okay? So there are requirements to hold financial credentials and to get licenses. Depending on what type of service an advisor offers, there are licenses for each of those services. All right, next question. Why is there so much variation in what financial advisors do? Well, it's not that different from doctors and attorneys. Doctors do a whole range of different things, specializing in different parts of medicine. Same with attorneys, different areas of law practice. So advisors can be the same way, where they focus on certain parts of the financial advisory world or different parts of the financial industry. You'd be really surprised to know just how many different types of financial areas that financial people can work in. And within the area of financial advice, there are advisors that might only work in the insurance area. And within the insurance area, they may only handle, for example, long-term care and not do any of the other insurance. Or they might focus just on life insurance and don't do anything else. There's a whole range of different things that an advisor might do. Now, some might do multiple things, where they might be involved in different services that they offer as part of an overall holistic plan. Advisors come in a lot of different shades and sizes. Now, on a related note, why is it that some advisors like annuities or other specific products and don't like the others? Well, some of it can be a legitimate opinion about the way certain financial products work. You know, if an advisor says, I don't like annuities and you shouldn't either. Well, hold on. A lot of financial products, including annuities, have their place as part of an overall plan, depending on the person's situation. Okay, so slow down, right? It depends, it depends, it depends. Some advisors will say they don't like another product because they offer something else. Imagine that, right? So be careful when somebody says, oh, we'll never do that. That's horrible. Maybe they got something else they want you to look at, right? Oh, never do that. I've got this instead. So you always have to be guarded about somebody saying they don't like something or they want to offer something else. All right, let's turn our attention to another important subject, and that is, do you have to have an advisor or can you do it yourself? Let's dig in. So if you have the time and you've got the interest and you've got the skill and you want to be your own advisor, you want to make all your own decisions, number one, there's nothing wrong with that. And number two, a lot of people do that. You have to understand, though, what you're signing up for, in that there's you and the actual investment decisions or financial decisions that need to be made. There's nothing in between. There's no buffer. There's no advice. Now, a lot of people will subscribe to newsletters and go online for different resources. That's all good. There's nothing wrong with that. A lot of people choose to work with an advisor because of the benefits that come with that. Now, that said, a bad advisor probably is worse than no advisor at all, but assuming a good advisor that knows what they're doing. So there's nothing wrong with doing it yourself. You just have to know what you're signing up for. On a similar note, mutual funds, okay? People sometimes ask me, do I need to do mutual funds? Why can't I just pick the stocks myself? Well, again, sure you can. If you've got the time, the talent, and the ability to get it done and figure it out, and the interest in doing it, right? So if you're going to buy individual stocks, be careful that you diversify enough. One of the reasons why a lot of professional advisors like mutual funds is it will give you instant diversification. Your typical mutual fund will hold 100 or more individual stocks inside of that one fund. And if an advisor is making recommendations, they might recommend a dozen mutual funds as part of an overall portfolio. So you can do individual stocks, There's nothing wrong with that. Again, people have done this for years. But you have to understand that you've got to be careful about getting enough diversification. Otherwise, you are making a bet that that one stock or that handful of stocks is going to outperform everything else. Okay, these are some of the questions you've wanted to ask. I hope I've answered some relevant ones for you. If you've got questions, you can send them to me for the program. And remember, be careful, be cautious, and if you do those things, I bet you'll plan stronger.
If you would like more information about the topics and our guests featured in this series, please visit our website at PlanStrongerTV.com. Also, if you have a question you would like David to answer, please send it to questions@PlanStrongerTV.com.